Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. I'm your host Ben and with me today is Richard.
Richard, hello.
So it's like Kenny, isn't it? Hey, it's Kenny!
Who's Kenny?
I don't know, I just thought it reminded me of South Park a bit, the way you went, I introduced you as Richard and you said your name again.
Oh, like, South Park Kenny.
You just remembered your name.
Yeah. It's been a while since we've recorded, so yeah. And I
feeling a bit rusty.
I do feel a bit. I'm almost recovered from illness, so that's something. That's okay, isn't it?
It's only been like 2 months.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. We are here today to talk about a little racing game. Now, both of us enjoy a racing game, don't we? You know, we're big fans of the Forza stuff, and I get more into the sim side of things, and that was the last sort of stuff I did was like F1 and then Grid 2, well not Grid 2, just Grid 2019 by Codemasters. But now I'm looking at, and I've been playing Need for Speed Heat, recently released on Xbox One, PS4, PC, yada yada yada. Do you have any history with the Need for Speed series, Rich?
Surprisingly, not really. I was going to say you tend to go towards the more serious end of the market, and I like it a bit more silly. So Need for Speed should probably be my bag. I played quite a lot of Hot Pursuit on the last gen, so I think that was PS3 I played Hot Pursuit on. That was awesome. Really good game. But typically I don't really play Need for Speed games. I think they're quite hit and miss, aren't they? So it's not one I sort of go to as a default. But how's this one?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say they've kind of struggled to find their identity this generation. They're very much wanting to be these shared world experiences. They're very much wanting to be these online games which are populated with players. You know, I think originally this generation, the EA pitched it as like they wanted Need for Speed to be the Dark Souls of racing games. So this kind of, you know, single player but connective tissue experience.
Yeah.
And they've not really been able to achieve that. The last game, I believe, was Payback, and that was kind of. Do you remember it was kind of advertised? It felt a bit like a Fast and the Furious video game. The concept.
Oh yeah, I never played it though, so I can't really.
I did, and it didn't get there. It really didn't, and at the end of the day, the kind of beyond the really sort of silly story, which is what we've got again in this one in Heat, it was that in the last game the handling didn't feel great, the cars didn't feel great, the racing at its core was lacking, and that has improved with Heat, and I think probably Heat is the best Need for Speed we've had this gen. And it does some stuff with the visuals that look really nice, but I think what we'll do is we'll just get into the concept quickly, and I'll just give you the sort of the setup, which is that, you know, it's another open world city environment with some like surrounding areas as well, you know, arid areas and things like that, desert-y terrain, but also lush areas. It's a place called Palm City, and it doesn't feel quite like a real place. It feels like a playground for racing, but that's okay. And the idea is that this place has become a mecca for street racers, and the problem there is the police don't like them. So the police have become incredibly aggressive, sort of paramilitary-esque. We're just gonna kill street racers basically if we can, and that's how the game starts, with them like literally considering murdering this street racer they've stopped by throwing him into a river off of a bridge. It's like the only way they'll get the message is if we kill these dudes. It's like, all right. And thankfully cooler heads prevail and they don't murder someone in the opening 10 minutes of the game, so that's nice. But then, you know, you're the outsider coming to the city, and you can pick what your character looks like and customize your character, and regardless of you're male or female, you get just as hammy dialogue, and I'll tell you what, I had a little bit of a moment playing this game where I realised I was playing it wrong. The first character I played was this, I made a woman character, and she was very, I tried to be realistic with her appearance and her car and stuff, and then I realised, no, what I should be doing is creating the ultimate boy racer. So I then created a dude character. You can change your character's appearance at any point in the game, and then I just gave him the most gaudy clothing and made the car the ugliest thing possible on 4 wheels. And then it was like, I started role playing as the biggest douchebag I could possibly be.
So how much of a stretch was that?
It wasn't much of a stretch. It came quite naturally, actually. But yeah, and then it's like the whole tone of this game is very, very goofy. It's really silly when it comes to the storyline, and that's fine. You know, you can just sort of go with that. Thankfully, like I mentioned before, the driving feels good. And it took me a bit of adjusting because I'm coming from sim racing games where, you brake going into the corner and you accelerate out of it. And I started the first few races like that and I kept losing. And then I sort of realised, no, Ben, this is Need for Speed. You need to slam on the handbrake, flip the car 90 degrees and power out of the slide. Yeah. That's how you drive in Need for Speed. And once I got that down, I was having a lot more fun. And then at the core, the gameplay mechanic is differentiated by the day-night cycle. Mm-hmm. So in the day, you have these organised street racing events, which are all like above board and done for cash. But then and there's no police really involved with that. But then at night, and this is something you can switch at will, basically from the map menu, you can switch between day and night. And you switch to night, and that's when you're doing the illegal street racing. That's when the cops chase you. That's when you have this kind of almost like GTA heat level, where the higher the heat level, the more cops that are chasing you, the more aggressive they get, and you have safe houses to get to like escape the cops. And when you get to a safe house, then it automatically transitions it back to day. That's how you end your night session. And at night, that's where you get the rep, which is the kind of the other currency in the game. So the rep kind of progresses and unlocks more stuff for you, whereas the money helps you buy parts and upgrades and new cars. So it's actually a really cool idea. It's a really cool mechanic that works well. And the game looks great at night with the neon shining out of the puddles. It's often raining and wet weather, so you have this really nice rain effect and streaking look to the visuals with the lights shining off the cars and the water, and it looks really, really nice. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds good. So is the day-night cycle always forced, or does it just evolve naturally during gameplay?
It's always forced. You always pick. If you just want to stay at day in daytime and just keep doing day races, it's never going to transition automatically to night. Right. You have to then pick, I want to do some night stuff now, which sounds a bit strange, but actually works really well. It means you can even set yourself in the garage these different objectives based on what you're going to focus your play session on. Yep. So you can do daytime objectives or nighttime objectives, and then you can like get more rewards by focusing on one or the other. I think both. The daytime is kind of inherently a little less exciting because there's no cop interactions, because the environments don't look as good in the daytime as they do at night, because the lighting obviously doesn't show off as well, but the weather effects are still there. You can still have storms rolling in during the daytime and stuff like that, and so there is quite a lot of drama in that visual. I don't think the world is that thrilling to drive around or to look at. I don't think it looks that great during the daytime. And the other weird thing is it's an open world racing game but with like no other cars. It feels strangely empty at times. There are other cars on the road, don't get me wrong, but it never feels to the level of like realism. There's no traffic jams, there's no sort of areas where things get snarled up, and obviously that's a balance issue because they want this to be a game where you're racing and that you're not constantly having to dodge traffic. However, when you're driving to the next race across the open world and there's like very few cars to see, it feels a bit odd. And I think the reason that, say, the last Forza can get away with that is its setting, because the last Forza is often in these quite empty, desolate areas between villages and stuff like that, or in the UK setting or in Australia. You can kind of understand when there aren't a lot of cars around. However, in Palm City, you're in a city for a large portion of it, and it never feels like there's anybody in it. So it does kind of push back a bit against the setting in that like lack of population in the cars. The other thing is the default setting when you load up this game is to play online, but it's sort of pointless because it doesn't seem to be a lot of people playing it, and even when they are, the interactions that you can have with the other racers, like other real players, is very, very minimal. You can't get into really competitions with them very well, which I think is something that Forza did incredibly well, which was you don't have an option, it's always online, and then every hour there's this big event that incentivizes the players to come together, and there's nothing like that in Need for Speed Heat, so you kind of don't need to play online with them, and I think a lot of people don't even bother because there is a play offline option right next to the online option in the main menu, so just go to that and don't bother with that aspect at all, which is a bit of a shame because once again the feeling is that Need for Speed has been attempted to be created this online experience from the whole generation, and it's never really paid off. It's never really happened.
Well, it's always been in the shadow of Burnout, hasn't it? Because Criterion picked up Need for Speed after they finished with the Burnout franchise. I don't know who's doing them now, but it always feels like Need for Speed was always chasing that perfect moment of Burnout Paradise and never quite got there, did it?
I'll be honest, it's weird because normally when I look at a video game, I'm looking at the developer and the pedigree quite closely, but there is so little of anything about Need for Speed now that makes it have an identity. That it could have been Criterion, they could have been involved. I think it's Ghostlight Games or Ghost Lab Games, something like that, are involved with it as well. But for all intents and purposes, these are internal EA studios, and managed to the point where they don't really have a differentiator between them. And Need for Speed games, the one thing is, this Need for Speed game does feel like a Need for Speed game. The things that really conveyed that to me was, first of all, the arcadey handling, which feels good. The driving, the road handling of the cars, they feel good. They feel like they change depending on the vehicle you're driving. It feels like it changes depending on the upgrades you make. And that's the other thing. Loads and loads and loads of performance and customization upgrades, which is just something you do not get in a Forza game. So like the fact that you can completely change, not just like a different decal or vinyl for the car, but you're putting spoilers on it, you're putting stupid wing mirrors and loads of headlamps and like a crazy bonnet. You can do that, and that's always been kind of a core part of that boy racer car modding scene. That really is what Need for Speed should be about, and I am really glad to see that it's a big part of Need for Speed Heat. It's absolutely freaking ridiculous what you can make your car look like, but that's also the fun of it, isn't it? That tuner culture, and I was able to really kind of lean into I'm that annoying twat from the Fast and the Furious films, the kid that wants to impress, Tokyo Drift in my bright green neon hatchback, which has got a spoiler that's almost longer than the car attached to it. That kind of thing. So it's like you can completely go into that level with it. Yeah, it's fun for that, in that regard, really good fun.
Mind you, if you're going to do that, then you typically want to show that stuff off. So it seems a shame that the online component is not quite as fleshed out or popular as you would like, because if it's just for your own benefit, then that's not so much fun.
Isn't it? That's not how I've ever played games like that. And you go back to the previous generation of Need for Speed games and whatever, and that wasn't an aspect of that. I think you just do it because you can, because it lends itself to it in the world. I'm not sure I'm too bothered about being able to show it off, really. I don't know. It's a fair point, and it is a shame that the online isn't kind of more fully developed. But I think this is a pretty fun racing game. At the end of the day, as we come to the end of the review here, if you're looking for a sort of arcade racing game that has an identity to a degree, this is, I think, sadly, a better iteration of that kind of racer than Grid, which came out this year as well. I think this knows what it wants to be a lot more than Grid did.
Yeah.
And while this open world is maybe not the most fleshed out, I had a good time driving in this game. I think you can while away quite a few hours. Something I like to do when I'm playing a game like this is I turn off the in-game music, which is invariably awful. I put on Spotify, which is integrated nicely on the Xbox now. I find a kind of relevant playlist for bumming around in a car, and I stick that on and have a good time driving. Once you get the hang of those drifts and they're, using lots of nitrous and just smashing into people, that's kind of the core of Need for Speed, and I think it's been developed well here, and I'm glad they got a kind of a win at the end of the generation after quite a few games which really struggled to understand what they were and what they were trying to do. So this is a cool game. Yeah, I quite like this game. It's not bad at all.
So yeah, probably maybe not, but probably the last Need for Speed that's only on this generation. Maybe the next one will be cross-platform, I guess. But yeah, good way to go out then, I suppose, after a hit and miss run of games in this franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I hope you enjoyed that episode of Experience Kills. I think Need for Speed Heat is definitely worth checking out if you're in the mood for something arcadey. We'll be back soon with more videos, and in the meantime, please give us a like and subscribe. That is all we ask for on YouTube. You can also leave us a comment on there, or tweet us at Experience Kills, or myself at DIYE, or Richard at Colonel Red. So until next time, I hope you've had fun. Let's drive off into the sunset one more time, Rich.
Brum brum.